Hello, everybody, fans of the New York Knickerbockers and whoever else is crazy enough to join us here on a September podcast slash live chat slash let's chat about whatever's going on in this world of basketball. I'm joined by the great DJ. And for those who don't know, DJ stands for
David
Detail
John. Oh, sorry.
Junkie.
Detail Junkie. I love that.
I was introing you, DJ. You interrupted.
I apologize.
I know it's David John. Anyway, glad to be joined by DJ. Just interrupted my flow. He is one of the great detail-oriented analysts out there, as you guys already know if you're here with us. How's your summer been, man?
It's been good. You know, I was just talking to my wife actually how it's kind of come and gone pretty quickly. Kids have been back in school for about a week now. So as soon as that happens, you know, you're back into the grind that you know, you have some little ones too. So it happened. It went away. Now it's sort of trying to, on the sports realm, it's been you know, if you're an NBA fan, you know, now that FIBA is wrapped up, it's a sort of a little bit of a dead zone here, but you know, there's, I think, some interesting topics that we can get into, but you know, just trying to get these kids out the door every morning is always like a struggle. I got out of bedtime tonight, so that's always a good thing. So, yeah, that was a nice miss on my part, but yeah, it's been solid, man. How about you?
I guess the question now is, how was your summer? I got to transition out, sadly.
Exactly.
Yeah, everything's good over here. You know, we had the baby over the summer. I've been kind of a little bit out of the loop in terms of what's going on. I did get to catch a bunch of FIBA, and so I'm sure we'll get into a bit of that, and maybe, I don't know, we're gonna get to some super chats, right? That's the deal tonight. But sure. Just overview, quick couple takeaways you had from FIBA, kind of, let's say, top 2 points that you came away with. Probably Knicks related because we are on KFS pod, but maybe even broader if you have it.
Well, I just think that I was, and I know this is going to sound obvious, but I was struck by the difference in the FIBA game compared to the NBA game. And I think the difference is some subtle, some pretty large, contributed to some uneven play by some of the Knicks players, namely Jalen Brunson. I think there was the lack of defensive 3 seconds, the sheer size that some of these teams are playing with. I think you may have tweeted it or someone else about just sort of throwbacks games with the post-up play, the movement shooting. You know, it's just a different game, and the U.S. has struggled a little bit over, you know, the last handful of years in these FIBA World Cup games. Partly because we just don't send our best players, but also because, you know, there's a continuity thing. There is obviously a difference in play. So I just thought that, you know, watching these games, it really hits you in the face, the difference in style of play, the 3-point line being a little more condensed, not as deep, I think kind of cramps some of the spacing that maybe Jalen Brunson struggled with a little bit. But overall, just a difference in play. You know, I watched it probably closer this year than in years past. And I think that was probably my big top line takeaway, just the difference. It's just a different game. And that's why some of these teams that are larger, that have been playing for years together can have these runs where, you know, on talent, on paper, it doesn't look like they can compete, but the game sort of tamps down the talent and the overall athletic ability. And it's more of an even playing field. And that's sort of why the U.S. has struggled in some of these tournaments.
Yeah, no, all great points. I agree. And, you know, Knicks specific, and I'll just say one thing and then we'll get to some chats. You know, I think maybe it should have been predictable that Brunson wasn't going to have like a superstar tournament. I think, as you said, the spacing's not as good. He thrives in space. And he not having that, the increased spacing the NBA provides, definitely. And then the defensive 3-second rule, like you said, I mean, you have bigs that can help out more liberally. And that, again, takes away his space. And he does need time and he does need space to operate. He's incredible when he has that time and space, but he does need it. And that is, you know, I don't want to say a weakness, but it is something that limits him in this context. And I think that was interesting to watch and kind of just like reflect on as I'm watching Brunson. He didn't struggle terribly, but I didn't think he didn't stand out much. And,
yeah, I mean, he shot well. I think he shot maybe 50% overall from the field, but there was I don't know if it is, I don't want to get into a Halliburton thing, but I think there is something to be said about having a point guard that is a little more quick with the ball, moving side to side. There were times where I think he missed passes where it was one more swing and you would have had a shooter with a tough closeout happening. In terms of like their pick and roll operation, the U.S. actually scored. I think it ended up being like 65% in terms of the effective field goal when Jalen Brunson was running a pick and roll. So, I mean, they got good stuff out of it, but there was a flow issue that definitely was not all on him. I mean, there was a lot of just, there was in the Anthony Edwards factor where it was him bailing the U.S. out a lot of times when they would get bogged down. So there wasn't much of a flow. And I think, and I know you've talked about this, to me, the larger sort of thing that occurred with Brunson on the floor was like defensively, they didn't love him on some of the point guards, which, harkens back to the playoff series against Miami specifically, where the Knicks had him against some of the bigger wings. Against Germany, he was guarding some of those big movement shooters. And it's just one of those things where it's a struggle fitting him into a defensive unit sometimes. And obviously without having the dominant rim protector that they came in anticipated, having him and Reeves and Halliburton to an extent, able to be hunted defensively was a problem. And I think that's, even though you had some good defenders on the wings, probably not enough to make up for the fact that you have some lead guards that just weren't up to the task defensively. And Brunson, for all we love him, but he's part of that, issue.
Yeah. And look, I think as it relates to both the last Knicks season and this coming one, I think we underrate a bit the degree to which the Knicks built in offense and have complementary personnel to what Jalen Brunson does best. And like, there's a reason he is super talented. He does certain things really, really well. And the Knicks emphasized and what's the word I'm looking for? They brought out those skills to the best of his ability. Like the isolation heavy offense favors him. It does. Like the fact that they can put him on lesser wings and they have RJ and Grimes and Quickly and Hart and all those good defensive wings that they have to support Brunson defensively, that's intentional. Like that's important. And the fact that they have a back line with a center who can always protect the rim it's all the reason the Knicks succeeded last year is because Jalen Brunson's great. And it's also because they built a team around him that makes a lot of sense. And I think you did see that in terms of the contrast between what it looked like in FIBA and the way it will look and has looked with the Knicks.
Yeah, it's a great point. And then last thing on that, again, we can move on. I think it's not just him. It's, Brandon Ingram, a star level player struggling to fit in. Anthony Edwards at times struggling to fit in, especially on the defensive end. And when you don't have these mega stars coming over and you have star players, but not superstar players that sort of need, like Brunson, an ecosystem that fits what they're great at. You put all these guys in on a team and you have a short turnaround. You're trying to make a run against teams that have just been doing this for many, many years. It's tough. I think, we underestimate that year after year in some of these tournaments, but it hit us right over the head in this FIBA World Cup.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll get into more discussions about this and about anything else going on in the NBA world or whatever you guys want to talk about. So with that, we'll hit up whatever super chats are out there, Justin, if you don't mind throwing them up. Andrew Claudio going first. What's up, Andrew? GMAC. Important question that we all need an answer to. Do either of you have any inventive, eco-friendly shower habits that you would recommend? Now, TJ should consider himself lucky that when I introed him, even though the intro that he rudely interrupted, that because I had some thoughts about introing him as a bifurcated showerer. That was how I was actually going to intro you. So why don't you inform the KFS fans, for those who don't know, about your fascinating lifestyle choices?
Well, to be honest, this has only been going on for a few years now, but I forget the comedian, and I should have looked his name up because he had a fascinating rant on showering. And his whole point was when you're in the shower and you start to lather up with the soap, turn the water off. Why do we need the water rinsing off everything? And, his point is, we wash our hands for 20, 30 seconds. And why aren't we like letting that soap sort of like marinate and get everything clean? And it was one of those like aha moments where ever since then, that's exactly what I've been doing. And, being down in North Carolina, I will say, it's not as cold as it is up north. So I can understand the lack of want to turn that water off and freeze in a shower. However, it is, as Andrew alluded to, more eco-friendly. I think it is cleaner. I just think it's a better way to shower. And you in the KFS chat just destroyed me, made fun of me to no end about this. Although I did have some support, more than I thought amongst the
more
group.
than I thought. God,
I thought. I will just say, if you haven't tried it, give it a shot. And if you come back to me and say, this is terrible, this is a horrible idea, that's fine. But don't knock it until you try it. Is my point. That's all I'm saying.
I have no further comment on this.
Listen,
I just have no further comment. We're going to move on. You guys can decide for yourselves about DJ and whether you want to ever support anything he does again. Ben Kim Gervey, what's up, Ben? Question for you. What are the top 3-4 things you look for when evaluating a player's defense? Does that change by position? If so, how? Importance of action of what they do or different actions? That's a great question, Ben. Thank you for asking it. DJ, I'll let you hit this one first.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I was trying to figure this out. I had posted something on Twitter about, things you may have over-indexed as we started out trying to analyze players. And one of the things that, and this goes back to the Frank Ntilikina days where I was obsessed with the wingspan on the defensive end, especially if you were going to, be a wing and someone that has some versatility. It was one of those things where I was just overly obsessed with. And I think it could certainly help. And if you add that on top of some awareness and some athleticism, you could certainly be a big time defender using that. But I think the one of the things that I really look for, and to me gets underrated year after year, is just sheer strength. And I think to be a really good defender, especially as a point of attack defender, you have to be strong enough to handle it. I think there is certain guys that can get by with it. And I think Quickly is an interesting case study in that, where he is a phenomenal team defender, but when he does struggle, it's when he is against some of the bigger physical guards or the quicker guards that can sort of get into his body and move him a little bit. That's something for him, especially as he gets into his 23, 24 age seasons. Can he add enough strength to mitigate some of the strength disadvantages he plays with? But strength is a big one. Lateral quickness to me, I think, is huge. And then just watching enough film to get an idea of how someone reads an offense, and how, are they in the proper position? Are they, if they're low man help, are they getting over in time? I mean, there are certain defenders that are big time highlight guys. Anthony Edwards just comes to mind as a guy that can make these amazing weak side blocks. But if you watch him closely, you'll see that there are times where he clearly has the tag the roller responsibility. He just got his hands on his knees, and he doesn't get over in time. And he's not the only one. There are plenty of guys that sort of have this unreal athleticism, but maybe are a step or two too slow. But that comes with just watching the film and trying to keep an eye and really seeing how guys move with the defense. So I think the awareness, the agility in terms of the athleticism, and just overall strength are big things that I tend to look out for.
Yeah, all for sure. Really important. Ben, I'm going to hone in on the language you use in evaluating a player's defense, which is less like projecting. Let's say if you're doing like a draft analysis, or like how are they going to defend on an NBA level. So like actually evaluating a player's defense, like that's currently in the league that I can watch film on. I don't know if there are really 3 or 4 things I look for as much as I just watched a guy. I think more than anything else, like on offense, like if we're trying to break down a guy's film, a lot of it, you can just like filter through all the shot attempts or his assists or it's always helpful to watch a full game and kind of just see how he moves, and how I always find that's the best form of film study. But when it comes to defense, it's like, you just have to watch, because so much of it is not going to result in anything. A good help side rotation doesn't actually necessarily lead to anything. It just means that the guy doesn't get a layup and has to kick it out. It doesn't necessarily like reflect in anything, any action. It's more of what you prevent. And so like for me, it's really just watching the film, and you can get a really good sense if you watch enough of how a guy is rotating off the ball and then on the ball. And to your question about, does it change by position? I mean, a lot of it comes down to how you guard a pick and roll. That's the league. The league is basically a series of pick and rolls with very few exceptions. And so for a guard, it's how do you stay attached? Do you stay attached? Can you die on all your screens? Do you get around? Can you rear view contest? And then for a big, depending on scheme, and it's important to understand what they're trying to do before assessing it, right? So what scheme are you playing? Are you in drop coverage? If you're in drop coverage, are you ready to spring? Are your knees bent with your arms out so that you can play both the ball and you can play the pass? If you're a switching big, obviously, and then it becomes an isolation defense, well, that's a whole different assessment and analysis. And then that comes down to some of the things that DJ talked about in terms of your lateral quickness, your ability to recover, some of the physical attributes that some players have and some don't, and some are better than others at. But it really is like defensive film and defensive analysis for me is just really about crunching the tape and watching one guy throughout a full game. Like every minute he plays, what is he doing on the defensive end? And you can get a pretty good sense, I think, of the level of defender that he is. And then you can use the data and supporting numbers that are out there to see if it hopefully corroborates what you've been seeing. Sometimes it does. If it doesn't, why? And those are the questions that come in when you're analyzing all the film. All right, let's hit the next question. Hit this one, DJ. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. This is from Rob. Thank you for the chat. A common criticism of the Knicks' top 3 offense was ISO frequency. Do you think that's a coaching philosophy issue, or is that a result of the strengths of the Knicks personnel, especially JB and Jalen Brunson and JR Julius Randle? Yeah, I think I hate to, it's like a cop out, but I think it's a combination of the two. You had mentioned in the intro how with Brunson specifically, the Knicks have sort of tailored their entire scheme offensively and sort of the personnel defensively to his strengths. And I think that's 100% true. And I think there is probably something on the coaching side where the Knicks' current offense, where it is ISO heavy and it relies a lot on what Hartenstein and Robinson and Josh Hart can do on the offensive glass, it takes away a lot of the variability. And if you're a control guy, and that we know Tibbs is that, I think you are going to lean into an offense that can produce and can produce in ways that are very predictable. And you sort of know what you're going to get with the Knicks day in and day out. And certainly that can limit maybe your ceiling, and we can have a broader conversation about how this offense can ultimately work in the playoffs. But in terms of the regular season, I think the Knicks are playing a style of ball that is just fits what they currently have. And I think Thibodeau, if he had different players, like I don't think he is such a stickler for this sort of offense where this will be what he would run if it was a Trae Young led offense or a Kawhi Leonard. I think he is running this offense because I think it does get the best out of the personnel that they have. And, I think that he's going to lean into that. And I don't know if I think it's the right decision, especially in the regular season. I think this team is going to win upwards of in the upper 40s in terms of wins, and maybe get into the low 50s if things really break for them. So I think they're doing what this offense is built for. And, I don't know how you can argue it. The question is, what are when the team has sort of figured it out, what are you going to next? Like, do you need to have the change of pace, so to speak, in the playoffs? That is something that is a tough question to answer. But for the regular season specifically, I think the Knicks are doing this because this is who they have as personnel. ISO is what Brunson does best. I think Randall he's really good in that situation. I don't know what other offense they could run that would bear better results.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely both. It's maybe the most important question, Rob, that the Knicks face, because there's no question that it worked. There's no question that it emphasizes the player's strengths, both, I think, Brunson and Randall specifically, and Mitchell Robinson. By being isolation heavy, your turnovers are going to generally stay down, and you're going to get shots up. You're going to get shots at it, and that also leads to offensive rebounds. And you have in Brunson an elite isolation player. And Randall, I would say, although the efficiency hasn't always been there, I think he's good at drawing and kicking and has games where he's very effective in isolation. And so it is both a compliment and it is a fair critique. Now, what bothers me at times is that the critique comes without recognizing the compliment, right? Like, you can criticize the offense and you can say that it was one of the reasons they struggled so much against elite defenses like Miami and even Cleveland to some extent. And I think that's fair, as long as you also recognize that very offense was third in points per possession in basket in the NBA last year and was the primary reason, because their defense wasn't all that great last year, the primary reason why they were where they were. I think you need to recognize both. And I think ultimately it's going to be important if this team has dreams of the next level and if they get another star and whenever and however they do it, it is going to be important for this coach to start to build out a little variability offensively. And I don't know if this coach is necessarily the one that's going to be able to do that. And that'll be interesting. And that'll be an important question to ask. But for now, and where this team is, I think you have to say that it is, for the most part, tailored to the players they have. And it is working. It is working. The other thing I'd say about it is Tibbs has shown the ability to adjust in other circumstances. It's like when the year that Derrick Rose was out with his ACL in Chicago, he ran his offense through Joakim Noah at the high post. Now, the Knicks don't have a center that can do that. Now, maybe they could run more through Randall at the elbow, but you're always going to have a spacing issue when you have centers that don't space the floor. And Mitchell Robinson, not only can he not space the floor, he can't really do anything with the ball. And that is limiting in terms of what you can run. You can't run the Kings offense that they run through Domantas Sabonis, all DHOs left and right with spacing around, when you have Mitchell Robinson sitting in the paint. It's just not feasible. And you can't run like a Warriors offense or even a Miami offense that they run through Bam when you don't have the types of players who move and shake and pass that way. Like, that's just not Randall and Brunson. It never will be, right? So there are some limiting factors in terms of personnel. That's not to say they can't add some variability, but I do think it needs to be recognized that it has largely worked, and it does emphasize the strengths of the players that they have.
I 100% agree. Now, in terms of the variability, could you, because I watched, and this is going to tie into FIBA a little bit, where, I think there was some good that RJ Barrett put out in FIBA that was heartening. I thought the shooting, the new shooting form, I think is going to, I think he's going to shoot it better this year, put it that way. Now, the thing that really jumped out for me watching him is how often he would get out in transition. And I think that alone kind of made his overall field goal percentage, decent, is because he just got out in transition much more than he did. It really has at any point with the Knicks. And I'm wondering if, because we know that RJ has sort of been the guy that ran the second unit a little bit last year. Could you have a lineup where you have Hartenstein, Barrett, DiVincenzo, Hart, quickly, that sort of unit where you can maybe inject a little more pace? And it was something that they did a little bit with Hart last year. As soon as he came in, the team did move a little better. Now, that ultimately is not going to get you that far because your team is going to go as far as Brunson and Randall are going to take you. But in terms of injecting a little bit of variability, I think with DiVincenzo now, who is a good mover without the ball, just a smart, heady player, decent cutter, really good spacer in terms of like his depth of where he could shoot from. I think there might be something with RJ as being your pseudo like lead offensive guy with that second unit where you could have a little more pace from the beginning of the season, where you can have this sort of first unit where it is ISO heavy and it's going to grind you. And the second unit with RJ and Hartenstein, where there's maybe a little more flow, but just lot more pace. And I think that in the regular season can sort of get you there. But in the playoffs, it's 40 minutes for Brunson, 40 minutes for Randall. It's not leaving you with much time to have any variability. So that's going to be the offense. But at least in the regular season, I think there is opportunity with the depth and the sort of interchangeable pieces the Knicks have, especially at the 2 and the 3, where you could have a little more pace, movement. And that's something where I think that's, to me, a reasonable expectation of what I think the coach can do. So as we go into the, training camp and preseason, that'll be one of the things I'll be looking for. What type of second unit will this team really be?
Yeah, and that's been a feature of the second unit since Tibbs has been here. And that was a lot of Derrick Rose in the We Here season. And then last year when Josh Hart came in, and Josh Hart is an excellent transition player. And he added a much needed jolt of pace to the offense and quickly generally plays faster. And obviously Obi was someone who craved transition, that the team didn't always give him that opportunity, give him that air. And losing Obi is going to hurt the transition game for sure, because that guy is very fast and runs very fast in transition. But no doubt. I think, that's a bit of a separate question in terms of pace. Like in terms of there's variability in the half court and then there's pace. But I agree that pace will benefit RJ. And I think Canada generally was more aggressive in scheme defensively, which led to more turnovers. Plus they had guys like Shea and Dylan Brooks who were going to force a lot of turnovers, and Dort, which the Knicks struggle to do, both in terms of their scheme because they're very conservative and because of their personnel, because they don't have guys who force a lot of turnovers. So Josh Hart helped that as well. So we'll see. I agree, though, in general, like trying to get RJ out in transition, trying to just play with a little more pace in general would be helpful. All right, cool. Let's hit the next question, shall we? New Gizzle. That is a terrifying picture, New Gizzle. How will our offense change with the addition of Donte / subtraction of Obi? Good segue. We have just been talking about that. Well, I'll start with this one. Donte is going to add a level of spacing that Obi, although he improved his shot, was largely ignored. And they will not ignore Donte DiVincenzo on the perimeter. Now, if he plays with Josh Hart, they will kind of ignore Josh Hart. So, but your second unit's just going to have more shooting, assuming Hart, playing the 4 in a more kind of traditional sense. I think as more of a wing than Obi, I just think you'll have a little bit more spacing. And look, DiVincenzo can play with the starting lineup too and add some spacing. It was a team that did not shoot the ball well last year. Their 3-point percentage just wasn't very good. And I think adding a shooter of Donte DiVincenzo's caliber is important. And then the stuff that DJ mentioned as well, he's an intuitive offensive player, and that's something the Knicks struggle with at times. He's a cutter. He's a space filler. He'll swing it. He's a connector in some ways, which I think Obi was to some extent too, but DiVincenzo's maybe proven it on a bit of a higher level. So I think those are two key. I don't think the offense is going to change all that much, to be honest with you. I think he'll mostly be out there spacing. He'll run a second side pick and roll. He'll be mostly spacing and then playing off the catch. But I just think adding that spacing element and adding the quick decision-making will definitely improve the overall offensive outlook.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't think, going from, top into Hart, I think both guys are treated roughly the same as shooters. In terms of each one can, I think, they're not bad shooters, but I just don't think that, as you mentioned, they're not guys that our teams aren't paying attention to them, and they're more than happy letting them get shots up, especially above the break, which, if you watch FIBA, you saw time and time again. And this brought up some bad memories from the Miami series where Brunson would penetrate and there would be one simple pass to Hart all alone, top of the key. And more times than not, he wasn't making that pass. And that's something that you just have to reckon with, but you just hope there is enough pace with this second unit where I don't, yes, Obi was great in transition, but I just don't, there's pace just sprinting up and down the floor, but there's also pace with and this is something Obi was really good at as well. So I don't want to, I'm not knocking him, but, just in terms of the ball moving quickly, I think the Knicks will be a little better in that regard with Hart and with a full season and DiVincenzo. So I just think the ability to have a little more movement, not necessarily as movement shooters, but more just moving the basketball quickly and side to side, getting the ball around the perimeter and getting guys, with tough closeouts, because it just seemed like, the Knicks are good with driving and kicking and getting those corner threes up. And it's something I think that you can sort of lean into a little more with DiVincenzo. And he's a really good relocator. It's something the Knicks don't have other than quickly. They don't have a guy, we haven't seen Grimes do it a ton. But in terms of not having the initial shot, passing it and then moving, or an offensive rebound, relocating, getting that open look, some things that DiVincenzo could bring to the floor. So I'm just excited to see him play. I think his addition has been a little under the radar. I think that he's going to be, it's tough to know where the minutes are going to come. And I think that's sort of where I think that's tempering things a little bit, because you don't know, is he going to be a 15-minute a night guy, 25-minute a night guy? But in terms of like where this roster is, there's 10 guys that deserve minutes. So unless there is some trade out there, but you have to assume there isn't. So it's just tough to sort of, when you factor in all the guys that need minutes, where are all the minutes coming from? But I think his just ability he's had a great basketball education, from Villanova to Milwaukee to Golden State. So just having a smart, heady player on this roster, it's going to be.
You skipped Sacramento there, maybe intentionally. Yeah.
I don't know.
Wait, you said 10. It's a 9-man rotation, right? Who's the 10th? Who am I missing? You're saying Deuce deserves minutes.
Well, I think he deserves minutes. Yeah, he won't. He's the easy guy to say, "Oh, you're not." He's playing spot minutes, and if there's an injury, maybe he's going to play a little.
But even within the 9-man rotation, it's going to be a tricky. Yeah. It's going to be a tricky allocation of minutes. My guess is he settles around 20 a night. But because whereas Obi only played the non-Julius minutes, which is why he only played 10 to 12. DiVincenzo can mix and match with all the wings, right? He's not a traditional 4 at all. So I think he'll settle probably 20-ish if I had to guess. That said, it could change. I think depending on performance, he could end up. Look, if Grimes really struggles early on or whatever, and DiVincenzo shoots the lights out, is it possible that DiVincenzo starts getting? Yeah, absolutely possible. Tibbs isn't going to mess around because Grimes is young. That's not his style. So I think it's going to be some pressure on these guys between Hart. Well, Hart's probably going to get his minutes between quickly RJ, Grimes, and DiVincenzo. There's going to be some competition in terms of earning minutes, and it's going to largely depend on how they shoot and how they defend. So we'll see how that goes. Let's hit the next question, shall we? Ben's back. Rokas versus Deuce. Oh my God. Who is better and who best fit? That is a very difficult question to answer, Ben. Yeah. I will let DJ take it first because it's difficult.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You got it.
Well, who's better? Oh, wow. Let me take the second part first. I need to sort of have my brain answering the second part and then trying to figure out the answer to the first part here. So the better fit right now is Deuce, strictly because he's a younger player. He's perfectly fine with the sort of expectations and of what he's going to bring this year. If there's an injury, as we just talked about, maybe you play 5 or 6 games in a row where you're playing 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to defend like hell. You're going to be competent moving the ball on offense. And I think you're going to shoot it pretty well. I think Rokas right now, because he is, he's a really accomplished international player at this point and really impressed me at FIBA. He just isn't, for his career, his long-term outlook, it is not a good fit for him to come over to a team that we just talked about already has 9 guys that should be getting 15 to 20 minutes plus a night. So in terms of the fit, clearly it's Deuce right now. Now, in terms of long-term, they're very different players. So it's very hard to compare the two, although we both would agree, they are in a perfect world. You're, sort of a lead guard. I don't think either one of them are starters, is going to be a starter. I don't necessarily think Rokas has the defensive ability nor the high level shooting ability to be a really good NBA starter. But I do think there is, a really good backup, versatile player there that you can play 15 to 25 minutes a night in the NBA and, get some scoring. I think his passing has improved. I think he's really good in the pick and roll to get his own shot. Now, his overall passing ability, I think, is a little bit limited. I would say better ceiling right now. I would say Rokas by a little bit. I think right now the fit, though, I think is clearly a Deuce for what the Knicks are needing right now.
Yeah. Largely covered my thoughts. I agree. And I think, look, I've seen Deuce impact the game at a pretty high level already on the NBA level. And so I'm going to lean there. I haven't seen Rokas do that. Obviously, hasn't had a chance. I had the opportunity to watch a few of Rokas's game. I will say, all of his success he ran a million pick and rolls in FIBA. He had the ball all the time, and he has great pick and roll craft. And like I pushed back a little bit. I thought his passing was pretty high level. And he kind of makes all the classic pick and roll. A lot of these European point guards are really good at making just the classic reads on a pick and roll, whether it's the pocket pass or the swing pass. You hit the opposite corner. Like they have that all kind of down, and Rokas does. And that's where you get to fit, where it's like, well, where is he getting the opportunity to do that? It's probably as a backup point guard, but with the Knicks as currently constructed, like with Quickly and RJ and Brunson, like how is he going to get the opportunity to run a bunch of pick and rolls? You think of like, it would have to be like almost like the way Pablo Prigioni plugged in the 2013 era. And he would get to run his share of pick and rolls on the second unit. That's probably like what it would look like. But yeah, Deuce is just the easier fit as like a theoretical 3-and-D guy. Now he's got to make more threes, and I think maybe he will, but he's really, really, really stout defensively. And again, building a team around Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, it's really important to surround them with guys who guard. And Deuce it fits in beautifully. And he's every time he's out there, he's made an impact. Like he's been really good for them. So I do lean Deuce as well. And that said, I liked a lot of what I saw from Rokas. I'm not sure about his off-ball shooting. Like the line's short. He shot well in the tournament, but the line is shorter, and it does take a bit of time for him to get that shot up. And Deuce has a really high release and a pretty quick release, even though, again, he hasn't shot it that accurately yet, but I have some faith that it'll come around. So that's kind of where I come out. But excited about how Rokas did, and I'm hoping that at some point he'll come over and we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, just really hard. You mentioned the defense for Deuce. To be 6'2" with I know he's got a insane wingspan, but to be his size and impact the game every single time he's on the floor defensively in such a eye-opening way. He's just such a unique defensive player, and great scouting by the Knicks in terms of getting a guy, where they picked him in the, I believe it was the second round, or was it late first round? I think it was the second round. To get him where they were
picked like 3 picks apart, the two of them.
Exactly. Right. So to do what he can do defensively, I mean, just a phenomenal job. And it was his calling card, obviously at college, but for it to translate really from day one, he's been good defensively. And you're like, if he can make shots, I mean, he's clearly an NBA player. So I just had, Knicks have had great injury luck these last few years. But I just, he'll get his time this year, and I think he's going to do the most with it. He's a good player.
No question. All right, let's see the next question. Hit it, DJ.
All right, this is from Jordan Bubb. Thank you for the comment. What weaknesses do you see in this roster? Which players' internal development can mitigate this roster flaws / improve this roster's floor and ceiling? All right, so what weaknesses you see in this roster? Which players' internal development can help mitigate it? Well, we talked about some of the spacing concerns, and when it comes to Josh Hart, who's going to get his fair share of minutes, he is what he is as a shooter at this point. I touched on RJ's shooting form in FIBA. He's adjusted his form again, which I think this is at least the third time since he's come into the NBA where there's been a significant shooting form change, and for a 23-year-old player. That's not the best sign, because you don't want to be tinkering that much, because you're tinkering for a reason. But I do think he has sort of figured out a form that has less moving parts. It's more of a classic one motion shot, which to me, when you're a guy that struggles with touch and just struggles as a shooter, getting rid of some of the extraneous movement is a positive sign. So I have been relatively bullish on RJ shooting even before this shooting adjustment in terms of the form, because I just think as a worker, he is I just think he's as good as it gets, and he's going to will himself into being a competent shooter. And if he can get to where he shot at FIBA, which is 37% on decent volume, I think eventually that'll allow teams to sort of treat him like a decent shooter and not a non-shooter, because obviously you can make shots and still be treated as a non-shooter, and you're really not helping your offense that much. So I think spacing is a weakness, but I think RJ's development as a shooter can turn that into maybe not a strength, but something that I don't think teams can exploit as heavily. So I think RJ he's gonna shoot it decently. So I'm pretty hopeful that he's going to be a decent shooter this year. And then obviously the ceiling could be, even a little better, in terms of his age and his development curve. So I think that's the one I would hone in on. What say you?
Yeah, I would say the weaknesses I see on this roster, the main one is shooting. And you spoke to RJ improving. I would really like to see Emmanuel quickly improve as a shooter, and kind of catch up to his reputation coming into the league as a shooter. I think he needs to shoot the ball better this year. There were times and stretches of the season where he mightily struggled to make shots. And for him to reach his ceiling as an offensive player, he's going to have to become like a pretty consistent knockdown three-point shooter, both off the catch and off the dribble. And then Quentin Grimes as well, like shot really well second half of the year. I think he has capability of being a 40% three-point shooter. I'd like to see that. And then, if those three guys all tick up, I think Josh Hart is what he is. Like he's late in his career. He shot really well for the Knicks, but on low volume, second half of the year. DiVincenzo is going to help, as we mentioned. I think Randall, I'm probably okay. I know his volume was crazy high, and he made enough to make defenses respect him. I think overall was a boost to the offense, even though his percentages weren't that high. I don't expect him to become like lights out again. But I think if you see from the young guys, from Grimes and from Quickly and from RJ, that'll help a lot. And then the other one is size. Because while they do have two centers, 7-footers who do a lot of the dirty work for them, you move Obi and you bring in DiVincenzo, and not only do you have a lot of wings, but you have pretty small ones. Mm-hmm. It's not a big roster. And in terms of what internal development can mitigate that issue, well, I'm going to hone in on RJ again. RJ is the de facto big wing, and he's going to have to play at times at the 4, and he's going to have to rebound. And one thing about the FIBA performance that was encouraging was there were a couple games where he really rebounded hard and well. A couple games where he had 9. I'd like to see his rebounding tick up. I really would. And he's going to have to contribute on that end in terms of playing like a big wing that I think he can. I think that's going to be an important step too. So RJ's development is important on both ends, as you can see.
It absolutely is. And it's when that offense with the first unit, we talked about how slow they can move, but when they're fast, it's usually when RJ rebounds the ball and just goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
He doesn't make the best decisions in terms of like choosing when to finish some of those plays, but getting RJ in transition was something I talked about earlier. One of the ways that he could do it even on that first unit is, as you mentioned, rebound the basketball on the defensive end and just going and seeing what you can get out of it, because I think he's just really tough to stop when he has a full head of steam. His athleticism is not great in half court, but when he is going full speed, he's just really tough at 220 pounds to stop. And if the decision-making can improve in terms of when to kick it out, when to finish, what type of finish to shoot to sort of pick in that situation, I think that is a big deal for this team, especially that first unit, which when they're going to run, it's usually RJ getting the ball and going. So yeah, I agree on both ends, him defending the ball, rebounding, and then using that ability to get out in transition could really help this team get some more pace too.
Awesome. All right, let's see the next question. Brian Valderrama. What's up, Brian? If RJ's inconsistency continues next season, do you see his minutes declining? If so, who do you predict take this minutes? Yeah, so I mean, we can make I touched on this earlier. I do think it's going to be a competition. I think RJ will get 30 minutes to start the season of a game, give or take. And I think if he really struggles, you now have more guys that are waiting to take those minutes when you brought in Donte DiVincenzo. So yes, I do. I think Josh Hart's going to probably get his 28-30 no matter what, because he's really important to what they do, and Tibbs guy through and through, and was incredibly impactful for them last season. You can't really argue that, even with his weaknesses. The question's going to be between, I think, Grimes, Quickly, and RJ and DiVincenzo. I think those 4 guys will, to an extent, be fighting for minutes, and I think it will, to an extent, be based on performance.
Well, I mean, that is something that is a little bit of concern if you're, RJ, who we just know it's sort of like a tradition like no other, where he's going to come out and struggle. He can't afford that this year, to because as you mentioned, there is a lot of competition and there just doesn't seem to be, and this obviously there's no reporting to this, but there just doesn't seem, I don't think there's going to be the appetite to sort of let RJ get his 20 or so games underneath him. And then he's going to work his way back into the fold in terms of his shooting and his efficiency and the defensive stuff. So I am hopeful that he can carry on. I think what was a really productive playoff run and a solid FIBA run to a really strong start this year. I think that if there is going to be a time for him to have a strong start, it's going to be this year, because I think there's a lot for him to build on, including I think a shooting form that is going to be more conducive to better efficiency, and just the fact that he's at an age now where a lot of guys sort of make that leap. Obviously there's going to be some usage issues in terms of like how much he's not. I don't know how many points he's going to end up averaging, but I just think if he can be a better defender and a better decision maker, this team can really, I think he'd be the third best player on a really good team. And I think that's what this roster needs. But yeah, I mean, if he performs poorly the first 5 to 10 games, even, I think there's going to be the whispers. And I just don't think the leash is going to be as long this year. I think this team has some high aspirations, and they just can't wait around for, RJ to work himself into a season 20 or so games in.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, like how these minutes are allocated. Who's the closing lineup, right? I mean, it's Brunson and it's Randall and it's either Hartenstein or Mitch, whoever's playing well. That seems Tibbs kind of rode whoever he thought was best for that matchup or who was playing well last year. That's fine. I think that's totally reasonable. So it's those three are like locked in. And then, but we saw all of Quickly, Hart, Grimes, RJ, they all finished sometimes and they all didn't finish sometimes. And DiVincenzo's a finishing quality player. If he makes 4 threes in a game, I wouldn't be surprised if Tibbs finishes with him on the floor.
And if you had to rank those guys, would you say Josh Hart is the most likely right now?
Yes, I think he's going to be closest to a staple in the closing group. So that leaves one spot.
Yeah.
And that's good. Look, it's going to be difficult. And some guys are going to be unhappy. And I think if everything goes chalk, and the other thing, right, if Hart plays and Hart is in that lineup, then the worst compliment to him of all the guys I just mentioned is RJ in terms of spacing. So like,
right,
it gets complicated. Like when the Knicks went on their real roll at the end of the year, they were mostly finishing with Brunson, Quickly, Hart, Randall, center. And I don't know. That's okay. And you can finishing doesn't mean everything. And like that might be their best finishing lineup. And RJ can still get 30 minutes a night because he's going to play with the second unit and they'll stagger and whatever. That's fine. But I'm illustrating how much of a crunch it's going to be at those positions. And there are going to be guys who aren't going to be thrilled with their minutes. And it's going to be somewhat based on performance, and it'll be a competition. All right, let's get the next question out. Andrew P., thanks for the contribution, Andrew. Why does Evan Fournier succeed in FIBA and not with the Knicks? TJ, you want to take that first?
I think there are just a ton of talented basketball players in the NBA, and I think that they're, for whatever reason, things don't go well with certain teams and you fall out of favor. But I've said this many times over the past couple of years. I don't think the league has ever had a deeper set of players in terms of talent than what we have this year. I think Evan Fournier is still a quality NBA player. I just think that he just, for his fit with the Knicks, some of his deficiencies are just stand out with this roster, and things went sour, and that doesn't take away from the fact that he is still an amazing shooter. I mean, he throughout his career, he's been a great shooter off movement. I think he's a decent pick and roll player, and you have talented guys that are in a situation in the NBA where things aren't working and things are just, for whatever reason aren't meshing with their current roster. They go over to FIBA and they're playing with guys that they've been playing with for many years, and you're empowered to do things that he clearly isn't on the Knicks roster. I think he can show that he is still a really good player. And I don't think he was as good this FIBA as he was at the previous World Cup or the previous Olympics. But I just think he's still a good player. He's still, relatively, he's not old by, he's not young, but I think he still has a couple more years of a play left where he's, in his pseudo prime. But I think that
he's only 30.
Only 30.
I actually thought he was like 32. He's only 30. Yeah.
Yeah, he's only 30. I mean, he's still, you could consider him to be in his prime still, and he's just a couple, years removed from, breaking a Knicks record in terms of 3-pointers made. So, he's a good player that just doesn't fit with this roster for whatever reason. He's fell out of favor with the head coach, but he didn't lose his talent overnight. He still has that, and he's, I just think that when you're empowered, and it's like anything in life, right? If you're given confidence and you're empowered to do something that you can still do, you're going to perform better, in that situation. So, obviously I think that is a big part of it. And, I don't think he's a bad NBA player, I guess is the point. And when you're in FIBA and you're given the reins to do a little bit more, then you can show yourself some skill.
Yeah. Yeah. Echoing all of that and adding it's easier for anybody when an offense is kind of built around you. And for a lot of these international guys where let's say the roster has, France is one of the better international teams normally, although they went out early this year, but he's one of the best players, one of the best French players in the world. So they're going to build an offense to try to get him the shots that he wants. And that's not necessarily the Knicks' priority, even though they signed him to a pretty big deal. They have other guys who they're considering when they're building their offense. And it's not all for Evan Fournier. And I think that explains some of it. I also think defensively, the physicality that's allowed on the perimeter in FIBA helps him a lot because he's slow. And in the NBA, you're slow and you can't touch a guy. It's impossible to stay in front. In FIBA, he's able to kind of rough people up a little bit, and that allows him to kind of stay in it on the defensive end.
And he's got Rudy Gobert, and you're allowed to lack of defensive 3 seconds, so you can sort of maybe have more of a wall
and less ground to cover. Yeah. All of that's helpful. And then also, the Knicks paired him with Kemba Walker and then Jalen Brunson, and that is the worst possible place to put that guy in. He needs to be hidden defensively, and the Knicks put him in positions where you couldn't hide him, and that was unfortunate. It's not his fault. I mean, it's his fault that he's not a very good defender, but it's not his fault that they paired him with point guards who needed to guard the worst perimeter players, so he has to guard someone that's better than that, and he's just not suited for it. It's not who he is. And when you say why does he succeed in FIBA, not with the Knicks? That's pretty relative because he succeeded to some extent 2 years ago, where he's one of the 5 best shooters in the league. He made a gazillion threes. He had a pretty good offensive year. It just wasn't a great fit with the roster, and that's ultimately why he's out of the rotation. So I think all that together maybe explains the difference. Thanks, Andrew. Got the next question up. Jordan's back. Jordan asks, what player would you want on the Knicks more, Embiid or Giannis? DJ, talk to me.
So I'm trying to think who would cost more. I'd guess Giannis would cost a little more, but putting that aside and just sort of,
I think it's probably both the farm.
Yeah. So maybe it's negligible. They're both going to cost a ton. Yeah. I would say Giannis. I think it's probably closer than maybe some would think. I think you have to give the edge to Giannis right now because he's won a title. He's been the best player on a championship team. He's performed amazingly, as good as you can perform in the finals before. I think he might be a year younger. There's probably a little bit less, and even though he had the knee injury and the back injury last year, I think there's a little less concern in terms of injury. Now, with that said, I do think there is a world where if Embiid gets into a little bit better shape, because he is so much more skilled, that he might age actually a little bit better than Giannis in terms over the next 3 to 4 years. But over the next, if you're just projecting out 2, because I don't think you can in the NBA, you can go beyond 2 years. I think you can probably get a better player out of Giannis. And now the question is the fit, right? Because you can't have Giannis and Mitch. So, I mean, you can't, maybe Mitch is in the trade, and you got to figure out a center that can space the floor. So it does sort of change a lot in terms of what you'd have to build around him. But I mean, right now, I think Giannis, has a little bit more left in the tank that I'm confident in over the next couple of years. And I think in the playoffs, he's done it before. So yeah, I think you have to give him a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, don't have much to add. I agree with everything that you said, on both sides of the argument. I would lean Giannis as well, and I think the durability thing also. And while you're right that like I'm a little nervous about Giannis, not in terms of injury risk, but in terms of just like how does this game age without a jump shot? You just know Embiid, he although he's been like relatively healthy over the last several years, he's had a long injury history. It's a lot of weight on those knees, and you just don't know. So there's a lot of risk there, and so I would also lean Giannis.
Yeah, I think that where can Giannis add? I was trying to think, can he add a jump shot? Are we beyond the point of him adding that element to his game? I think you're shaking your head.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So the aging of his game is going to be interesting because, right, he's still the best transition player in the NBA in terms of, I'm not even going to qualify.
In terms of Giannising, yes.
Yeah, in terms of Giannising, he's the greatest. He's arguably the greatest transition player in the NBA. He was great last year. Still, I still think
if not in history, like he's a short list. It's a short list, and he's on it. Yeah,
he's on it, and he's still, he does enough in terms of he's an amazing finisher. Still, I think you can probably get 2 to 3 years of pretty peak athleticism out of him. Obviously, you can't predict any injury, but he's still. And then defensively, I think I like him a little better than Embiid. In terms of the versatility, a little more versatile. Yeah. So I just, and especially in the playoffs, I think he's just proven to be a better defensive player, just full stop. So I think it's Giannis right now.
I do wonder.
I would be happy with either one.
Yeah. Right. I do wonder if the evolution of Giannis's game is actually to put on a little weight and just become like a full-time center. That might be interesting.
Where can he add though? Because I don't think
he's gotten okay in the post. I think he could get even better.
No, I'm sorry. So like the size though. See, I'm thinking he's so big in the upper body.
Oh,
he's not that big lower. He doesn't have those like tree trunk legs where it's just like
that's what I mean. It's kind of like changing his frame a little bit and just to be able to take a beating down there.
Interesting. Yeah.
But like maybe that's the answer. Is he just becomes like a real full-time 5 who just is a menace on the pick and roll and offensive boards and transition. But I don't know. It's an interesting question. All right. Let's see the next question. We'll take a couple more. I got to go because I got a baby crying in the background. All right. Hit it, DJ.
All right, JG, question. What's the word on the lawsuit between the Knicks and the Raptors?
What's your inside reporting on that, DJ?
I had none.
You're in the courtrooms. You're in the courtrooms. You're studying the docket.
Unfortunately, I am not. But Adam Silver did address it in his his press conference recently. Didn't obviously give any details, but he did say, which I thought this was relatively interesting, that he would reserve comment because, this may end up getting to his desk anyway. So sort of anticipating that, I don't know the machinations of how it gets out of the legal system as it is, and then gets over to the league. But to suggest that it's going to get to his desk, I mean, I think he's hedging a little bit. I don't know. At first I thought it was a pretty big deal. At this point, I just feel like I've heard enough really smart people talk about how, while this may have gone a little bit beyond what is customary when a player or when a personnel changes teams, most didn't think it rose to where the Knicks took it. However, we'll see where this goes. I'm obviously not going to predict anything, but no inside information, but I thought it was noteworthy that Adam Silver, suggested that it may come to him eventually. So, doesn't really answer the question. However, stay tuned because I do think it's an interesting thing to follow for sure.
Yeah. Don't think there's much of a word in terms of anything new. Last I heard, there's nothing new on the docket. So the complaint's just still out there waiting for an answer, which they'll have to file. Depends. Probably 30 days from the complaint, which is probably coming up pretty soon. So like the Raptors' answer to the complaint will be out there soon, presumably, unless it's dropped before then. I would bet the league is trying to just like keep it internal if they can. It's kind of weird that the Knicks filed the lawsuit here. I don't know. In terms of like what the actual accusations, I'm not blown away by them. I don't think that they're going to compromise anything that the Knicks do or try to do. In some ways, I think it's much ado about nothing, although it's actually like more of a legal issue than a basketball issue, I guess. Like it doesn't really impact anything to me. So not much of a word there, JG.
Yeah, I will say if the Knicks can prove that the Raptors head coach had, was sort of leading this, then I think there is more than it's worth, obviously, for the Knicks pursuing. But we just don't know. It was the Knicks complaint. We don't know. Raptors, as you said, haven't responded yet. So we'll see. I guess more to come.
All right, we got any more, Justin? All right, this is the last one I'm gonna take. DJ, you're welcome to stay on and answer more. I'm gonna call it because I'm trying to stay married. All right, Capo says, what teams do y'all think involve themselves in trade talks with Houston, if any? Oh wow, that is. Go ahead.
I just hope none. I think this is. Now look, I can get on the high horse and talk about the fact that what Kevin Porter is alleged to have done is reprehensible and awful, and no team should even entertain trading him, even if it's just to waive him and recoup some draft picks. With that said, some team is going to trade for him. I mean, this is just what I think that there's going to be, it may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen in the next few days, but I think that there will be a sort of like, all right, this is out of the news cycle. Let's try to sneak this in and get a couple of draft picks and move on. But
what's his contract? You know it
it's guaranteed this year. I think the number might be 15, 16 million. But it is guaranteed. And then he's got a bunch of non-guarantees after that. So that is sort of where the Rockets are right now, where they're trying to obviously save on that guarantee, but they also were needing him to play. This is a team that really, had some high hopes, and they want to win games this year. And he was, an important piece to that in terms of what they.
How important do you think he was to them winning games?
Well, the question is, how much does he impact winning versus what the Rockets sort of planned for him? I think he was going to play 25 to 30 minutes.
Right. Those might be two different questions. My point. Like in terms of winning games, I'm not sure how impactful he actually is, especially when you have Jalen Green soaking up a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it'll like hurt their wins. Obviously, they were hoping to like either make him increase value, whether as a player and as someone who can impact winning, he is very talented, or as an asset to trade out. Now he is a toxic asset that, as you say, you'd have to attach picks in order to get rid of him.
Yeah.
I don't know which teams, to answer your question. I honestly have zero insight or idea as to who would entertain such a thing. But I think DJ's probably right that at some point it'll wash over. Unfortunately, that's how these things go, and some team will try to sneak it in on a Friday afternoon and get some draft picks out of it. But I don't know who. I hope not the Knicks.
I hope not the Knicks either.
All right. On that note, God, is there any Justin? Are there any other like more upbeat questions that we can answer this on? If not, it's okay. But thanks, brother. Okay. Which team do you think will give Knicks trouble in the Eastern Conference outside of the top three? Okay, so the top three are
so we're assuming
Bucks
Celtics,
the Celtics, and the Sixers, the Heat, the Heat with Lillard, the Sixers. Are the Sixers still considered top three if Harden might not play?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, all right, well, let's say Cleveland first.
Oh, I forgot Cleveland.
Well, yes, and I definitely don't think Jordan was projecting them in the top three. However, younger roster, second year Mitchell, you brought in some shooters to sort of help out on that wing. Do you think they've done enough to where you would I mean, they're obviously a viable threat to the Knicks, even though the Knicks wiped them out in the playoffs. How much of a threat would you consider them right now?
What does give the Knicks trouble? Does that mean like in a playoff series? I guess we can define it however we want. I don't think Cleveland's going to be an easy out for the Knicks again. I think it's more dependent on Mobley's development than anything else and anything he did in the offseason. But I think if Evan Mobley starts to really develop into an offensive threat as a shooter, as a playmaker, then that changes the whole calculus, and that team becomes a real threat in a lot of ways. So I think they could give the Knicks trouble. I think that the Bucks are the worst matchup, and I've always thought that for the Knicks, because you think about Drew Holiday guarding Brunson, you think about Giannis guarding Julius, and you think about the fact that they have stretch fives, which means that Mitch has to be out of the paint, something that he struggles with, and then it's just like Giannis being Giannis. So I always thought that was the worst matchup. The Knicks have played Boston well. I don't have confidence that they beat Boston in a playoff series, but they have handled Boston well. And then outside of those teams, I don't know. The Sixers.
What about the Hawks? And I know that, you know, I think there's enough depth on that roster right now. And I think you get, second year Murray, and you have these young guys in Griffin and Jalen Johnson, where if one of them, maybe even both of them, take that next step, and a Okongwu, who I think is on the cusp of being a really big time, not an all-star, but a really good starting center in this league. I think that team at least is giving me a little bit of, I wouldn't be shocked, to put it this way, that they're in the top 5.
Are they sliding Hunter to the 4 in their starting lineup now? Is it going to be Bogey with Murray?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I think if I had to just guess, it's going to be a Hunter, Sadiq Bey, maybe 3-4, and you can kind of interchange both of them. They're both 6'7" and incredibly strong, and you can figure out, whether, who you're guarding depending on the matchup.
Right,
or they go Bogey.
Bogdanovich is a 6-man. That makes sense.
You can go. Yeah, so I think that they're really deep, and I think Trae Young has become very underrated. I think he's an all-star level player. I think this is a really good team that, I think the Knicks are, I wouldn't say tier above. I think within that second group, I think the Knicks are a little bit further ahead, but I think the Hawks are young enough and have enough upside to where it just wouldn't shock me that they finish ahead of the Knicks. And if they ended up playing in a 4-5 matchup, listen, we've seen Trae Young dominate a playoff series against the Knicks. Different roster, I get it, but he's a supremely talented player who I think is being slept on a little bit right now. So they give me a little bit of a pause. I think it's just a good roster, and you have Quinn Snyder with a full season, full training camp, off season. I think that'll be a huge thing for them as well. Yeah,
it's fair. I mean, Indy has a lot of talent, and Miles Turner's had some big games against the Knicks in the past.
Shout out Miles Turner calling the Knicks America's team.
Yeah, really.
You gotta love that.
This is the like the point of the season where you get these player interviews and they're just saying the craziest things. And you're just like the Morris twin interview. I don't know if you saw that one.
I did.
You get all these player podcasts now, and there are a lot of them, and a lot of them are great and they're fun. But like, man, some of the things these guys just like spew, and it makes you like. There's a degree to which like we assume that players like are so smart about the game because they play it on the highest level, and they are to some, but also some of them don't really know necessarily why they're so good at it, and there doesn't. Playing at the highest level doesn't assume like incredible in-depth understanding of how the game works, I think is an important takeaway from some of these interviews, but also it's just like silly season out there. Like they're saying that it's wild what's going on. Yeah, America's team, the New York Knicks, sure. But yeah, like indies can be tough. They're tough in transition, obviously. Obi scoring 26 is like inevitable. It's going to happen. There's no doubt. It always happens. And then Orlando always gives the Knicks some trouble, and I think they're going to be decent. And
you talked about how the size, right? The Knicks aren't a huge team outside the centers, and
that's a big wing team. They have size, and also again, like with Wendell Carter being able, like at least a capable shooter from 3, where Mitch has to step out. That always scares me. So yeah, the East there are a lot of good teams, not a lot of bad ones, and it's going to be a grind. There are no soft spots in the schedule necessarily where you can just assume some wins. Like it just doesn't really happen anymore now with the way the league is. I think.
So where are you with the Knicks in terms of? Can you give me a range of wins that are? Yeah, that you're comfortable with, like a low and a high end.
I think 50 would surprise me, but not shock me. But I would say like between 45 and 48, 44 and 48, something like that. That's where I would probably go.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 50 is on the high end, but I think continuity. We've talked about words come up a few times in this conversation, but I think the Knicks, their continuity is going to be a big deal for them. I think it's a big advantage.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun, DJ. Great to catch up. Can't wait to be able to actually break down some games with you. That'll be fun. Just around the corner. But appreciate everybody. Please like and subscribe and give 5-star ratings and share reviews and whatever you can do to promote us and our team. KFS in general always is doing great work. And wishing a happy new year, a Shana Tova to all celebrating Rosh Hashanah starting tomorrow night. It should be a great year for everybody and for the Knicks. DJ, thank you so much. We will talk to everybody soon.